There used to be this respect for time, for creativity, for original thinking that we just don't even have anymore. The ones who come up with the best ideas are the ones who still have the luxury of time.
Hey, what's up, people? It's Brandon Ferris, and you're listening to A Quick Read, an advertising podcast that talks book smarts and street smarts with people who have been there, done that. Today's guest is creative and entrepreneur Jamie Pelayo. She's worked with luxury brands from beauty to fashion, and she's creating one of her own. We dive into Deluxe and learn the difference between craft and copies. You know what to do. Tune in and turn up. What's up, Jamie? How are you doing? Are you out west? Are you in New York? I know you kind of dance between. Are you in Europe? Where are you these days?
I'm in Los Angeles currently. I've been here quarantining basically since March 12th. That was really my last work flight.
Yeah. Well, I know that's where I met you. And at the time I think you were living on a farm. Is that still the case? Are you still living the organic lifestyle?
I am still slightly living the organic lifestyle. My animals are currently being boarded at a nearby farm. We've moved. We're working on a new project and hoping to reintegrate them into the homestead in the next few months.
Wow. So we'll get back to that. But I met you when I had a project I was shooting out in LA for a fashion brand. And I was so excited to get to meet you. And I think you saved the day for me and made me feel like everything was going to be all right. So I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy that you're able to join the show. Now, I was really excited and surprised with the book that you selected. You told me about this book called Deluxe by Dana Thomas, which really tells the story of the luxury fashion industry. Why did you choose that book?
Well, I started my career in fashion and luxury, and also studied it in college. And I was noticing that I didn't really feel like the industry was living up to the authenticity, the history, and the values of what I had studied in its past. So when the book came out and I read it, it really helped me sort of make a concrete shift in my thinking about my career and how I wanted to contribute to the legacy of working in this industry sector.
Yeah. Well, and this book really dives in, and it was not what I expected. I thought that maybe somehow it was connected, to this story of like marketing these big brands, but really it's this beautiful tale of craft and how it hits this moment in time where all things aren't well, and some things happen in the industry that become frustrating. And it was really interesting. And then I was so intrigued of how there were so many learning points along the way. So before we dig into that, let's talk a little bit about your background. You mentioned you studied this type of thing, and you were, early on moving into the space of luxury goods and fashion and beauty. What do you mean by that? What kind of work have you been doing that kind of started back then that leads us to now?
Well, I grew up in the good old Midwest in the 90s, and like many people at that time, probably lived voyeuristically through fashion magazines. And maybe shows or things that kind of showed off this kind of more glamorous life that was being lived in New York and Los Angeles and overseas abroad. And I was attracted to the creativity in the magazine pages. So when I decided what I wanted to study, I wanted to really get into design, to fashion, but not as a designer, more as someone who supported the industry. So I spent a few years in my home state going to university, studying in sort of the textile and apparel curriculum, which was more slated towards, working for a Gap or a department store traditionally here in the States, and then spent 1 year abroad at the London College of Fashion, which was really the experience that helped me truly understand the fashion industry and where I was hoping to go with it. That what was happening in the late 90s out of London in particular, with designers like Hussein Chalayan, Alexander McQueen, John Galliano, really starting to take over the couture houses and doing these really incredible fashion shows coming out of Central St. Martin's, which was the sister school to the school I went to in London. It was just a really exciting time to be learning about fashion and engaging in that kind of creativity that I didn't really have in my curriculum back home stateside.
Yeah. The other one thing I want to chime in there on, this was also when we talked 90s and fashion. I mean, we're talking about like 90s hip hop as well. I mean, a lot of these fashion brands were being showcased from these in these music videos and those sort of things. So was that part of that culture as well? Were you absorbing some of what was happening there?
I think the culture that I was absorbing was still a little bit more elitist in a way, if you will. I think predominantly you had influences from Sex and the City in terms of women's fashion coming out of New York, and Sarah Jessica Parker and those girls kind of setting that tone. And you had definitely some streetwear influences coming through the runways. One thing that comes to mind is like Alexander McQueen's Bumster collection, which was kind of a very controversial moment where like literally he sent women down the runway with low pants that kind of had the bum crack, if you will, showing out, which was a little bit shocking. So they were starting to kind of incorporate those nodes, but I think for the most part, hip hop and that kind of culture was still taking from those kind of more elitist worlds and trying to incorporate that bling into their world a little bit more. I think right now streetwear and street culture is very dominant, but at that point it hadn't really been yet.
So you were really soaking in that couture culture of this like high-end world where like, you know, custom fittings and only a very small percentage of people were experiencing some of that sort of thing.
Well, I think it was already being democratized because you were seeing it rolled out in Hollywood culture, and the magazines already had shifted pretty much in the 1970s to start being a little bit more, still aspirational, but a little bit more attainable. Anna Wintour at Vogue was very famous at that time in the late 80s already for mixing a very high-end couture kind of sweater piece with a pair of jeans. And that was really the start of that kind of high-low and a little bit more aspirational shift in magazine and the fashion culture from just being for a very super wealthy group of people.
Yeah. So they're soaking it in, observing it. How do you then immerse yourself? How do you all of a sudden step further in?
Well, the thing that was really important to me was really looking at it through a historical lens and how different factors in our daily lives, no matter what part of society we came from, influenced dress. And that's what I really loved. So I really loved spending a lot of time in the museums, like Victoria and Albert Museum, kind of looking at those costume collections and understanding what kind of things were coming out of social movements and also cultures that were being adopted in large and mass to become trends that we were following. And that was what was really, really interesting to me. And then I translated that more academic side to, the business of fashion to my first job, which was working as a PR assistant in Los Angeles, helping to put couture gowns on celebrities for events like the Oscars and other red carpet events. So there was that like level of craftsmanship and uniqueness to what was happening, but that was really the only platform or forum anymore for this type of more handmade, really unique design where everything else was going super ready to wear and a little bit more expected and copying, if you will. There wasn't like a true inspiration point.
So how long were you in that space? How long was that, kind of the world you were a part of? And then what was that next translation in your career to, how did you learn from that and shape it into your next step?
I lasted about a year, a little bit more in the PR assistant world, because a couple of things came to mind. I I really didn't find putting outfits on celebrities to be very fulfilling. I felt like you were really at the end of something that the process itself of the creation and the inspiration was way more interesting than whoever the person was that was going to don it on the red carpet for a couple hours. And it was disappointing to me. I think culturally that so much emphasis is put on that final embarkation of that design versus the whole process, which is way more fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting point that you pull out there. And so at what point, if you're there and you're like, this isn't really fulfilling, I mean, where do you go from there? I mean, how do you parlay a skill set and a knowledge in a very specific field into something that you could turn into, more of a career as you were looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I was involved in several lucky accidents, if you will. So much in that industry is based on people that you meet and whatnot. And my next step into it was still in kind of the PR realm, but working with two people who were doing PR and marketing and more of a consulting type of role and helping young designers, LA-based designers, actually build their businesses and build their collections. So I went from strictly just helping, again, put clothing on celebrities for this kind of end wow factor to learning more about the process and being involved in everything from fabric sourcing to working alongside them with pattern makers to seeing those collections journey to trade shows and then ultimately marketing exercises like fashion shows and photo shoots, et cetera. So I spent the next 2.5, 3 years really understanding the industry and was very fortunate at a young age to have incredible experience working in ateliers in Italy and France and Switzerland, and also a long stint in Istanbul as well. So that was a really incredible experience where I really learned a lot more about how things were made. And then I left that to really join the media side, which was kind of the only unchecked box in terms of like that journey to me, and understanding that the inception to the end point of the fashion cycle. So I left that part of my career and joined Vogue magazine as an assistant, actually on the advertising and creative services side. After having a career for about 5 years, I went back to being assistant just so that I could learn the media part of that. And that was 2005. So a very fortunate time to be there and really kind of be in the last few years of the kind of supremacy, if you will, of that magazine, pre-recession, pre-digital even, quite frankly, and really kind of see the power of print in that way.
Wow. So you took all that knowledge and the historic knowledge, the expertise, you've seen the whole sort of industry, and now you're helping to sort of bring it forward in this magazine. And so I get along that way, did that influence, as you start to become a maker and a creative and a producer who's like bringing this stuff to life, I guess, what were those skill sets how are they, coming to life? And I guess, is this sort of the journey that brought you into, sort of a creative and a producer and sort of creative director? Or like, I guess, how did that fully get expressed at there in the magazine? And then how did that continue to transfer on? Because obviously, when I reached out to you, you were producing all sorts of stuff. And so I guess what I'm looking for is that connection from fashion to this other world.
Totally.
Of production and bringing these things to life.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent the first 4 years of my career kind of as an apprentice on the job, learning every aspect of the industry. Going into the media part was totally new for me. As an assistant, in particular on the advertising side, we were really more interfacing with the brands that were advertising in the magazine. However, we were in a really interesting time where that side of the magazine wielded a lot of power because of the amount of money coming through advertising. And we were able to be very innovative in terms of the type of programs that we were able to offer those brands to really solicit the dollars from them, to grow the pages of the magazine, so to speak. And so you saw this shift in, especially because the onboarding of digital platforms, websites, which hadn't even really been built out for many brands at that point in 2005. Our publisher, Tom Florio, who is such an amazing man, and I really think he had such an incredible vision, started to build out both digital internet platforms for Vogue, as well as television programming and eventually online video programming that was being advertiser supported, but bared the Vogue name and also the ethos of the magazine as well. And so I think because I had all this experience coming into an assistant position, which I really took a step back to do and learn, and that was really humbling. But because I had all of this knowledge and had some experience, I was just in a very lucky, fortunate place to basically be handed the reins to the video production portion of the magazine at an early time, which was really incredible. I can't explain it, but yeah, essentially at that time, you know, as people like me who were growing out of being an assistant could take on the digital reins or the video production reins of a big magazine like that, and worked with such an incredible team that I learned from, both people internally and external partners, to learn the craft, and also took classes at NYU, extension courses in production specifically, so that I could really apply those to this new job that I had. And that is really what allowed me to have this career as a producer in both photo and video. It's all thanks to Vogue.
Wow. Yeah, no. And that was, you know, that back then, I mean, you were dealing with like big budgets, and there was like, you know, that was before the democratization of technology and software. I mean, those were days when edit suites were, you know, being booked, you know, for a pretty penny. So, you know, that I assume that was an interesting time. So that's really awesome. So we go from production. Obviously, I met you, you know, after that time, and I think it was like 2015. We worked on our first project for John Frieda, which was a hair care sort of piece. And I remember calling you, and I was like, I need you. I was like kind of freaking out because I was sort of like new in the game, and I needed this thing to be amazing. And I was like, I need amazing models. I need awesome locations. And I loved it because you had that Midwestern sensibility, and you were just like, Brandon, it's going to be okay. I got you. And that was it. And from that day on, you've been my LA producer, and it was an amazing experience. And you got, you know, wonderful Wilhelmina models, and you had these beautiful locations. And then since from there, we did a project not too long ago. It was a whirlwind where we filmed in Joshua Tree and Malibu, and we did it all in 2 days, and did it for a tequila brand. And it was just a lot of fun to be able to see that. But a lot has happened for you, because from the first time that we worked together and the second time, you became a mom, right?
I did.
So a lot had happened there. So now you're in this sort of like new space. And that was just so much fun to see, like, you know, you on set without a baby. And then all of a sudden the next time it was like everything we were doing, there was this like cute little baby in your arms. And of course, everyone on set was just like goo goo and gaga. And it was just cool to see this, like, you know, it's still the same you, but like this, like, you know, mom version, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in that transition from being childless to being a mother, to have super supportive clients who wanted the baby on set. Actually, one of my my main fashion, or actually beauty clients, you know, there were a couple people who had babies at the time, and we had like 3 or 4 babies on these crazy sets. I mean, those days
That's
are
awesome.
Gone. It's just so weird. I was just having a phone call actually discussing not going to New York for a shoot and figuring out how I can help them remotely because of COVID. So we live in such strange times. But, you know, I flew to very unexpectedly had to rush get a passport for my son and fly to London for a 4-day shoot that was like 20 hours long. Each day, my husband stationed nearby, bringing the baby over for breastfeeding all through the day and the night. So, I've been fortunate that it was a very easy transition, and I had really incredible clients that allowed me to continue to work and mother at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, and that we are in a space now. I think years and years ago, maybe those situations were different, but I certainly love it. I think it's great to see people for who they are, and I think that's a lot of our conversation today is just talking about authenticity and as we jump into this book, one thing that you did for me that I thought was I really appreciated as a producer is you really had a commitment to your craft. And as we look at the book and we look at Deluxe and we look at fashion, these stories of these brands like, Gucci and Louis Vuitton, whoever it is we're talking about, most of them started in like these small towns and these like craftsmen, and they built this sort of quality over time. And I've noticed that, in advertising, that you can really tell a difference with people who are committed to their craft, whether it's a copywriter or a designer, in your case, a producer. And when I walked on set, it was like everything from the craft service to the stylist you selected in hair and makeup, like everyone had great attitudes, and you could tell that you appreciated building a team that was committed to their craft. So talk to me a little bit about the importance of craft in your career, and then transition that into this brand you've built around craft, stories, and objects.
It's a very loaded, multidimensional question, Brandon. But I think, to me, it's never mattered if the budget on a project was $500 or $500,000. I'm going to put as much effort into making it as good as it can be within the parameters that we're dealing with as possible. I've been criticized in the past for not actually knowing how to ascertain the difference between how much effort you should put into something. To me, all things are equal. I take pride in that. I also take pride in running positive sets and positive atmosphere. I can't tell you how many times people have told me how refreshing it is to not be on set with anybody who, especially in the fashion industry, it's got kind of a reputation, and you can come across people who can be quite nasty to each other. And I just don't roll that way. I don't even see the need for it. I think, cooperation best comes out of literally helping each other out and realizing we're all in this creative process together. And not only that, how fortunate we are to be able to work in a creative field. There are so many places in the world and so many people that would love to have the access and work in a part of an industry that is purely inspirational versus the toiling labor that most people in the world have to do. So, that is very important to me in all endeavors. And then really how it all kind of translated to stories and objects. I mean, we left off kind of Vogue, but I spent several other years working in media at Pop Sugar, and then went in-house at Sephora and Violet Grey, producing content, working on partnerships, whatever. So I continued to have this relationship at every job, both with kind of an editorial point of view platform, as well as a brand marketing advertising point of view, and kind of straddling both lanes. What is the ethos? What is the, what's important to communicating to an audience through this editorial platform, whether it's a retailer like Sephora or a magazine like Pop Sugar or Vogue, with a brand that wants to associate with their audience and their voice. So I think, for me, that was really helpful because I could put on those two hats. I could, think about what John Frieda needed versus Lunazol tequila. and try to, always do the best to do something unique for each of them, but always keep in mind like what we're trying to give to the consumer and what that point of view is. For stories and objects, that really was more born out of what we'll talk about in regards to the book, but also my experience in the fashion industry. When I was reporting in the video part on a lot of fashion shows and interviewing a lot of designers, I just remember so many of them talking about being inspired by a vacation or a certain culture, and incorporating that into what they were sending down the runway and whatnot. And although I loved that, it just became like such an expected answer every single time. Like, oh, I was in Morocco and I saw this and yada, yada. And I thought like, God, we're borrowing from all these incredible cultures. None of these people, especially at that time, obviously things have changed, but none of these people are really getting credit, not only for inspiring designers, but also like that original craftsmanship that they are responsible for, that their culture is responsible for. So my goal was really to highlight that, to tell stories of people and cultures and bring those cultures to life through the objects that they created. And to give those voices a platform, quite frankly, in their own language. So I painstakingly film everything in their own language and have it all translated and subtitled. But to me, it's preserving culture. It's preserving language. And it's giving credit to the people who we often are borrowing from and commoditizing their culture.
Yeah. And for those listening, Stories and Objects it's kind of hard to describe. It's part travel log journey. It's this beautiful photography. There's these artisan goods and services that Jamie's bringing to the forefront. You can purchase. So it's like it's a interesting experience. I think I described it halfway decent. How do you describe what it is? Because it's not just a brand. It's like this. It's a journey.
Yeah, I mean the goal for me really, first and foremost, is to tell the story. As I mentioned, we do about 5 to 10 minute long videos interviewing the people where in the towns they're from, and then showing kind of their work process and what they're engaged in and what they're doing on a daily basis to continue these traditions that in some cases are thousands of years old, and that passion for it that comes through the community. And then there is a commerce portion of that, which truly is meant to, it provides an incentive to the artisan for allowing me to come into their lives and spend a couple of days with them. It's a revenue source for them. And it's a way for me to tangibly kind of give people a little bit of a virtual journey with a souvenir at the end of it if they want to take action on it.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I know you take those trips, at least several times a year. I know you're planning those. Do you have any, well, right now you're probably like a little stir crazy because you can't travel. I know you travel quite a bit. But I think there's so many journeys right now that you have on the site. So, if you are feeling cooped up and you want to take a little trip to an exotic place, visit Stories and Objects, and we'll put the links in the podcast show notes here, and you can just sort of discover these beautiful places and people that Jamie's been able to tell the stories of. It reminds me in the book, Louis Vuitton had a quote in the book that says, "Luxury is not consumerism. It is educating the eyes to see the special quality." And I feel like Stories and Objects does that. It helps educate us to see some certain things. My question to you is, what do you say to those in advertising and marketing after, hearing some of your experience, on this point of commitment to craft? What do you say to them as they think about their brands or their work after seeing these artisans in exotic places? What's the thing that you take away and go, you know what? Here's my thought on commitment to craft.
Yeah, I think it goes back to authenticity. Like, what makes your brand, the brand that you're promoting, most authentic in itself? And it doesn't have to be like that provenance, kind of story that I think at a certain point now is being told quite a bit, where it's always relating back to this maker story from hundreds of years ago or whatnot. But sometimes the brand is so far removed from where it started that doesn't even make sense to try to make a campaign about it. It's like, what makes it most authentic in the moment? And why do people need it? I think we're living in a time where, and that's hard for advertising. I get it. It's been really hard, I think, for the fashion industry in the last year too. I'm very fortunate that I transitioned to beauty and wellness because it's very much needed right now where we're at in society. But I think a lot of people are asking themselves and of the brands, like, why do I really need this? What is this really going to do for me? And I think it's just really figuring out authenticity in the moment, whether or not that's hearkening on the past and trying to get back to a relationship and a connection with it, or figuring out how you can be authentic today.
Yeah. And that really brings up another theme in the book. The next big idea I want to jump to is this idea of what you value determines what is valuable. What I mean by that is, the book talks about the luxury industry has changed the way people dress. It's reimagined our economy and class system. It's changed the way we interact. It's become part of our social fabric. But also, to achieve this, it's sacrificed some integrity, undermined its products, tarnished its history, and potentially hoodwinked its customers. You talked about some of this, just slapping of brands on everything. And some of these, legacy brands started to just see dollar signs and they would slap their logo on just about anything. So I guess talk to a little bit about that and your experience of, if you start to value the dollar signs or other things other than craft along the way, there's some consequences with that, and I think we've seen the fashion industry has had a period where it's gone into some dark places around some of those things. How did that section of the book speak to you?
Well, I think that, overall, as I mentioned earlier from my studies, there has always been a connection between using dress as an expression of culture and individuality. So even before there was anything that was really deemed or termed the luxury industry, you had different times throughout history that, what type of objects, throughout all of our history, quite frankly, in terms of what you see in museums, objects and cloth and colors are different things that really symbolized status. All the way back to the Roman ages, depending on what style of toga someone wore, or what type of sashes that might go across it, or specific colors. There are so many examples of that throughout the ages. I think what has happened more recently, which is a bit conflicting because, look, I'm not an elitist. I don't come from an elite background. I always like to let people know that I'm the daughter of a truck driver and a travel agent who found my way by working really hard to get to Vogue. I was not a socialite and didn't get that through family connections. So I'm not saying at all that like luxury should remain like this snobbish type of elitist, for only a few type of attitude and commodity. But I think what has happened is that the consumer doesn't really care if something is truly authentic and real and actually a luxury item or something that looks like it. And that's enough for them. And I had mentioned to you earlier kind of the example, like when I was, back in college, we had a trip to Florence, Italy, and we had a trip to the Gucci factory. And the night before, when all of the students, we all arrived in Florence, because we were on student budgets, we saw those counterfeiters in the street in Florence, of all places where all these goods are being made. And we all went and bought counterfeit Gucci bags or whatever. And then I didn't do it, but I saw other students carrying their counterfeit Gucci bags into the Gucci factory. And
Wow.
I thought, oh my God, this is so disrespectful. I mean, I was only 20 at the time, and I thought, okay, I would rather work to save up the money to buy something authentic and real that was a point of view from a designer and grown out of the craftsmanship versus someone who replicated it at a cheaper price to try to look similar and then carry that around to try to signify that I belong in some certain part of society. And I think that, to me, is the problem. I think luxury is something worth saving up for and to be proud of. You're going to take so much better care of an item that you had to save multiple paychecks for than something that mimicked it to make you feel like you fit in and that just becomes disposable and doesn't really make you feel good about yourself or your place in that system. You just end up wanting more and more. And I think that has become the issue that we have been faced with in the last 20 or so years in terms of people wanting to just emulate a way of life to, I don't know, make them feel better, self-esteem wise, make them feel like they fit in more versus actually looking at what these things are for, again, the craftsmanship, why they cost that much, you know, a living wage, whether that is an artisan in France or an artisan working in the Colombian jungles. But really having appreciation for that object and having a relationship with it beyond just consumerism.
Yeah. You know, in the book, there was a quote from Coco Chanel that said, being copied is the ransom of success, you know? And I thought, man, that's really interesting, especially in that section about counterfeiting, you know, and you just sort of told that story. And it got me thinking, you know, about that idea of, you know, when you do great work, you know, and as we think about advertising and creative, you know, whether it's design, copy, or, you know, installations, videos, whatever it might be, you know, we see that in advertising as well. There is a copy culture. You know, when somebody makes a great commercial, you know, you start to see the copycats that come across that. So, you know, as a creative yourself and a producer who kind of brings these things to life, how much does that play in? Do you see a lot of people that come to you or say, we want it to look like this, we want it to feel like that? How much of that copy culture translates into your experience from the advertising side?
Yeah, well, just going back to Coco Chanel for a second, it's very interesting because obviously she was someone who really brought fashion to women that was in some ways derivative of male-influenced fashion. She was one of the first people to get women to be able to wear pants in a chic way that felt feminine. And she's one of the first people who actually created costume jewelry. So jewelry that looked expensive and looked like gemstones, but didn't necessarily cost as much and looked very stylish. So in some way, yeah, she copied, but also came up with her own style and also kind of did democratize fashion in a way for other women to be able to attain that and to look really stylish. I mean, to the point today. But yeah, I think what has happened and why there's so much copying now is time. What I have seen, you know, and I come into the process now even more so as a freelance producer. At the end of the creative process, I get handed like, this is the direction that we need to bring to life. Help us put it together. And the timelines for that, when I talk to creative directors that are in-house or even myself.
Tomorrow. We need it tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And so there used to be this respect for time, for creativity, for original thinking that we just don't even have anymore. The timeline of like a marketing objective or a new collection being briefed on to when you need to shoot the assets and the campaign and all this stuff has really, I think, shrunk to a quarter of what used to be invested in that process. And you're seeing that throughout all industries. And it's more and more. The digital space it's like, it used to just be like, okay, we need 2 ideas a year, right? And now it's like, oh, with digital, we need a new idea every week. But we have the same budgets. Yeah. We have the same budgets. So, before we needed, 5 images, but now we need 500 images.
Yeah, a library of content.
Yeah, and I think that's why people aren't original. I think that's why it's really hard to be original. And you will look, whether it's a musician or a screenwriter or, someone in the advertising industry, the ones who come up with the best ideas are the ones who still have the luxury of time to invest in it.
Oh, wow. That's a great, that was a great thought there. I mean, to be able to just have some space and let your mind wander and think and reflect and, have to face the truth, the truth of who you are and who you thought you might be and, what you're trying to achieve and, all those sort of things really start to create tension. And I think, good art and original creative, I think can be a result of tension in release. And so that's just a great insight. As I think about this conversation we're having, it really points me to, a third idea that I sort of extracted from the book, and it's really that luxury, it feels a lot more like a state of mind than it does like a dollar figure. And, what's really interesting is there was a quote from Karl Lagerfeld that said, we live in a time when expensive and inexpensive, not cheap, I hate that word, can live very well together. It's the first time in fashion that this has happened. And he was talking in the interview about this space now where, you have people, movie stars and whoever else that are simultaneously wearing H&M as well as, Chanel, and it's this, now there's collaborations where H&M is collaborating with, with fashion designers. Target did a collaboration with Isaac Mizrahi. So this interesting space where things have been, made accessible, which is not too different than the creative space, right? Where now, cameras are really cheap, software is really cheap. Anybody can get into the game of creativity. And so I thought that was really interesting from the book. So I just wanted to see your thoughts on that, this idea of, and you started to hint at it a little bit before with the budgeting, but like, you kind of can create something awesome with a small budget these days if you have the right team. So talk a little bit about how important it is to, I guess the state of mind of creating something of luxury or something really well done versus having to have just massive budgets.
Yeah, I think we have all been forced to learn how to do more with less, which is a good thing. And that does help with innovation to a certain extent. I think in terms of, how it's being described in this book, and also just as a general point at large, it's really not necessarily something whether something's expensive or inexpensive. It's the ethics behind it now, right? So, to your point, talking about, and I don't have any of the insider knowledge on any of these collections and how they're done with H&M or Target, but imagine if, for example, I always think of Missoni when they did I think it was with Target collection, and it sold out like in a day. But you have something that is, made in a special way for however long of the history of the company, with craftsmen that are getting paid a kind of an elite daily wage. I don't know, $20, $30 an hour, whatever it might be. I don't have those statistics. But you have this look coming out of something where people are being well paid. They live a very good quality of life. I've been in some of those factories and ateliers in Italy where you've got an incredible on-site cafeteria, and everyone takes a 2-hour break in the middle of the day and can go home and eat with their family or go to the seaside, take a siesta. Some of them even have schools there for children, not because they're trying to keep everyone contained, but just to make sure they're giving like that level of education. And, I've seen that side of the experience. And then you see them do these cheaper or more inexpensive collections with a Target or a H&M or whatnot at a very, very low price point. In some cases looking very similar, although that the fabrics wouldn't be nearly as nice. But you know that they're products coming out of countries where people might be making $1 or $2 a day. And they might, in some cases, in the worst cases, we uncover that it's forced child labor, or we uncover that they're living in dormitories with multiple people to a room and really have no quality of life. And that's the difference between going, okay, I'm going to wear something that is a derivative of something luxurious in the $20 range versus paying $200 or, I know just today's prices are insane, but $2,000 for something. But that is the difference. And obviously these people in, countries in Southeast Asia where a lot of this is happening, they deserve to make a good living. They deserve to have good jobs. But we have to look at that disparity when we're trying to emulate something, when we're trying to, again, show an association with something purely because of aesthetically how that is looking and the signal it's sending to people versus truly investing in the value of it with the ethical question of today, where we're at.
No, those are hard conversations to have, right? Because, we see some of these things that are exciting collections at a place like Target that's accessible. And, for especially those of us in the Midwest, it's a slice of, fashion and culture that we can't really get anywhere else. And so those things are exciting, but, to have to face the music and think about, okay, where's this stuff sourced? How is it happening? I think those are really hard conversations, and it becomes, something that we have to, make choices on. So I think that's, I think you bring up some really interesting points there. One of the things as I can, on this idea that I found interesting was something from Louboutin, who mentioned growing up watching his father, who was a woodmaker or a craftsman, and just hearing him talk was really cool because I didn't expect him to be as I don't know, just sort of accessible. And there was this sort of quote that says, if you can sculpt in the vein, it's beautiful. If you go against the grain, it breaks. Same goes with business. If you go with the flow, it grows naturally. But if you try to grow your company in an unnatural way, it breaks. I did not do a company to make money. I made shoes, and it became a company. And I was like, wow, that's just such an interesting thought. And when you think about some of these big fashion brands who made a shift from craft to sort of, profits, I think, it moved into those spaces. When you talk about breaking, there's more and more of those stories that you talked about with the work conditions and the counterfeit culture, which is pretty dark once you look at how some of that world works. But in general, I really love that sentiment of, do what you love, really invest in something of beauty, and, it will sort of show its way. And, I share that because, in your story, and what I love about you is you've continued to sort of grow and spread your wings into new areas or whatnot. But for you, as a transition from where you've been in advertising in the beauty space, you mentioned it earlier about moving into wellness. And so you have sort of fallen in love with this new sort of expression that's made its way into a company that you founded called Natureofthings that's all about wellness. So I want to make sure that we talk about that because I think it's really important, and I think what you're doing is super creative. And I think it really has a nice extension of this whole conversation we've been talking about with, luxury and commitment to craft. And I see some of these things starting to culminate into this brand that you're building. So tell me a little bit about how you got there, and just a little bit about, again, these influences we've talked about as they're now being expressed in this wellness brand.
Yeah, just to touch on that quote from Christian Louboutin, I think a lot of the brands that have this incredible history that we respect and covet and want to buy into today come from that place. You know, Louis Vuitton was a trunk maker for royalty to start. You know, there is still an atelier in the hometown that he grew up in where people can commission special, unique goods in that same kind of way, while you have Louis Vuitton stores all over the world and people buying it online and hopefully not buying counterfeits anymore. But, you know, where that's more accessible now, there still is this section of the business that really taps into that root, which I think is very important. You know, we live in a very difficult time for brands to grow at an organic pace. The game you're talking about, you know, a lot of brands that started when money was still based on the gold rate, when there was a tangible connection between the value of something real. Whereas now, so much of value, it comes from the stock market and is all kind of digital, or even Bitcoin to a certain point. It's all a little bit based on speculation versus reality. And so when you're building a business and you're trying to be organic about it, it's very difficult, because in order to really have the appropriate amount of money to build a business in this day and age, and to do all of the marketing levers and everything you need to do to really get it out there in a big way, you need capital. And that usually comes from investors who really only care about a 5-year exit plan. No one is setting out to really start brands to say, hey, what's this brand going to look like in 60 to 100 years from now? But yet we continue to look at brands and point to the best brands being the ones that were built 200 years ago. You know? So it's difficult in this day and age to really authentically build a brand that can take that organic brand building route and not have this demand from stockholders, shareholders, board of directors to just want to focus on the bottom line. So it's a difficult dance. And, you know, how that relates to Natureofthings, about a year and a half ago, I met with my business partner for the first time, and we had been put in touch, mainly, I think, for the same reasons that you and I have been put in touch. We were, I think, eventually, he was starting this brand, and eventually he would need kind of a creative partner to bring some assets to life. And
right.
We met right when he got investment and had not gone about creating the brand. They hadn't even developed their first product. But what I can say is that the brand was growing out of a space that was related to the cannabis industry. And the investors wanted to invest in a CBD brand, beauty brand. And they did a lot of research, didn't really find anyone on the market that was developing anything that they felt was right for their investment. And my business partner, JP, was involved in that search and that vetting, and they decided to invest in him and said, why don't you start a company? So we met. JP was starting a CBD beauty and wellness brand. It was unnamed. Again, there wasn't really any product direction yet. But at that time, a lot of which grew out of my travels for stories and objects, where I had gone and harvested roses in Turkey, and we did a story. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Iran last minute, but we did a story in Iran, also harvesting roses. We harvested argan oil and various different things in the beauty industry. So I was getting closer and closer with this sort of plant medicine connection. And when he was trying to describe for me what they were looking to do, I went away over the weekend and said, again, going back to this entire conversation, seeing something that is like trying to capitalize on a trend or a gold rush for the sake of that alone doesn't feel right. But I think there is something here because we know that CBD and cannabis has been plant medicine used for thousands of years. Cannabis as a plant is mentioned in some of the oldest medicinal texts that exist today. That's the Hindu Atharva Vedas, thousands of years old, which include that as one of, I believe, 5 sacred medicinal plants. So there's a long history here. There is, there's value in this ingredient. But just to build a brand around that and build yet another CBD brand in the space does nothing for respecting that ingredient and does nothing for the normalization of it. So I went back to them and said, hey, here's what I've come up with. I have recently come across this poem that is called De Rerum Natura that was written around 50 BC. By a Roman poet named Lucretius. And Lucretius was trying to describe for the Roman public what the philosophy of Epicureanism was actually about. And he was arguing that it wasn't about hedonism, but rather about how to find true pleasure, to derive true pleasure out of your life. And he was saying the only way to derive true pleasure out of your life was by eliminating 2 things, fear and pain. And what we saw from the research in terms of how people are using ingredients like CBD, along with others, was that they were using it to treat inflammation and pain, and they were using it to treat stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, yes, let's do something that really gives justice to what this ingredient, this wellness ingredient can do. But let's also combine that ingredient with a host of other very beneficial botanicals, minerals, elements that also have been known throughout history to amplify that effect so that we are building true wellness, true natural wellness for people that go to target just those things.
And so you guys offer all sorts of, there's like body bombs, body stones, face stones, there's bath immersions, floral bath, there's digestibles, all sorts of things. And it's really starting to shape into this brand. And I have to say, like, I can just, everything in our conversation you can see in this brand, and so it's very much, it feels rooted. It feels like it's coming from a space that has meaning. It feels luxurious in the most positive ways that we've talked about today, and it's just really exciting. So, like, how new is this, and what are you guys learning, or what's the next step for this brand, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we came to market just over a year ago. So we basically had 3 true months in the market pre-COVID. Which has been a very interesting experience. But again, as I said, we've been so fortunate to be in the wellness space because people who have been able to discover the products, to help them relax, help them treat specific, stress points or pain that they're experiencing currently has been really great because it's kind of like that's the stuff that people are really looking at as necessity for the times. Again, I had to be very thoughtful. I had a lot of experience creating content for a lot of different brands, from Sephora to Violet Grey, $10 products to $500 products. I've seen the market. I knew it was out there. I knew how people marketed it. What I often didn't know is really, again, going back to that essence, that journey, like what is it about sourcing of the ingredients? What makes that authentic? How can we connect that back? So for us, we use organic whenever we can. We make sure things are ethically sourced. We use things that work, that are high quality, and are going to actually have a real efficacious impact on your well-being. We started with 3 categories. bath immersions, because we know that this type of botanical and mineral delivery system is best absorbed through the larger surface of skin. If people are just rubbing really truly like any botanical, but certainly CBD, because of the CBD molecule, how large it is, on their hand in a hand lotion and then possibly washing their hands 10, 15, 20 minutes later, you're not getting the benefits of that product. You need it to really be able to absorb through your skin over a long duration of time. So bath immersions were very important to us as an anchor of the brand, layered with topical skin treatments that we worked very hard to make sure that they do penetrate through the skin, and in products that aren't, again, going to be washed away. You would never put CBD in a soap or a cleanser. You're just going to wash it off of your body, and you're paying a lot of money for a buzzword and not something that's actually going to do anything for you. And then in terms of the ingestibles, obviously taking turmeric, boswellia, all of these incredible plant medicinals, including CBD, ingesting it is also highly effective and one of the best ways to receive the benefits. So it was this loop between internal and external support and best delivery and absorption options for the products to truly work. And again, that just goes back to trying to be like providing people with things that really work, not just jumping on a trend, using the word CBD. We don't use it on our packaging, our branding, our logo, anything. It's not a CBD brand. It's a plant-based wellness brand. And, making sure that we're using them in the ways that are actually going to work with all of the examples I just gave in terms of, I've seen products on the market that have CBD or whatever, or even vitamin body washes. And I'm like, if you're putting that on, I don't know how long you keep a body cleanser on your body, but I probably for maybe 30 seconds, there's no way vitamins are going through my skin, So being real.
I'm like a lot of guys. I go with the classic bar soap. Give me a bar soap,
Well, hopefully you're not using any with any chemicals and toxins that are not good for your body, Brandon.
No, I try to choose. So my daughter is very skin conscious, so she tries to lead me in the right directions. But I think this is just so cool to see that you get to be a part of building your own brand. This whole conversation today, and just knowing you, the short time that I've known you, to see all of this culminate where you've watched other people in the beauty space and in fashion, and you've been on this journey, and then here you are, and like you're a part of it. Like now, so I guess my final question to you is, how do you take your own advice? So of all the stuff you've learned along the way, as you think through where this goes moving forward, as you're building this brand, what are the things, is there one thing that you're like, what, as I build this brand, I have to hold up this one ideal that I've learned across my experience, because again, you're now the brand that's under critique, right, by yourself. So what's the thing that that you say to yourself, and in turn, those listening, is the most important thing?
I honestly think it's authenticity, because you're putting a message out there that you need to live up to every single day. And, we've talked to investors or people in the space that were just, they just said, oh, why are you investing so much in packaging? If you did this just in a plastic bottle and formulated things that people could mindlessly pump or dump down the drain in their experience and just buy more of, you would make so much more money. And I just found that idea appalling. First of all, we know that plastic is destroying the planet, and it's also absorbing into our skin and animals. And there's a lot of research out there on that. We're not going to compromise on that. And I'm not going to be involved in a brand that's going to create products that people mindlessly pump and dump down the drain and buy more of, that aren't actually going to work. And for me in this project, more than people saying how beautiful the packaging is or how beautiful the photography that I've done is, the thing that I know that makes it work and the thing that makes me most proud is when I get emails from people saying how it has helped them sleep better at night, or it has helped them manage chronic conditions that even medication from doctors have not been able to. To me, that is what we're here to do, and that is what makes it work. And, very much to the Christian Louboutin example, like we built a wellness brand that works. And if it becomes a business, because obviously we're still in the first year and we're very happy where we're at, but we're still building it. But like if it's working for people and it becomes a legitimate business because it works for people, it's more important for me to go that route versus a buzzy trend that and applications of certain type of ingredients that just are not effective in helping people.
Yeah, man, that's so good. What a great last thought there. And again, you guys you're gonna be awesome because you are just I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I always love working with you. And I think people are gonna see the authenticity in the brand. I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. So, just so people know, I just want to make sure. So to check this out, they go to natureofthings.com. Is that correct? And can you purchase everything on site? Can you purchase everything there, or is some of that going to be regulated by state? Because I know with the cannabinoid stuff, I don't know is all your stuff legal currently, or talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we only use broad spectrum hemp extract. There's no THC in that formulation, so we can deliver to all states. We deliver to Canada. We have accounts in Europe and also Hong Kong as well. So there is
awesome.
No issue with that at all. It's natureofthings.com. You can buy everything in the collection there. And
awesome.
There are select retail partners.
Excellent. And then as far as for those that want to go on the journey, storiesandobjects.com. You can go there and, there's the way the menu's broken down in your navigation. It's the stories, the objects, and the travel notes. And it's just, I got to let everybody know, it's just a fun place to go. Like, just go immerse yourself in some of these stories. I mean, there's all sorts of really cool stuff here from, Colombia to Indonesia, and it's just beautiful photography, beautiful video. I want to encourage everybody to go check that out. So I know you're always up to something. Is there anything else you're doing? Is there any other side hustle? This is sort of the point in the podcast where we plug all the things you're doing. Obviously, we've covered a lot of those because they're a part of your story, but anything else that people should know about Jamie?
No, I mean, I'm still working, freelance producing because, we're putting so much of sweat equity into these projects. But
yeah,
these are definitely, Stories and Objects is taking a little bit of a backseat right now for multiple reasons. COVID being one of them, not being able to travel, but also because being a fairly new mom as well, I started to plan a bunch of projects in Egypt and India, and I thought, is this really feasible with a 1-year-old? And then COVID happened, so that kind of took care of that on that own. So I'm really focusing on Nature of Things. We've got some great new products coming out, 5 new products releasing out over the next few months that
cool.
are really incredible for both men and women. We like to say that our collection is universal. It doesn't matter what your skin color is or your gender. It's made for everyone. And so that's really awesome. It. I want to really streamline my focus because I think that also helps me become most authentic as well, in myself, to really be able to hone in on the skills and the needs of those particular businesses. So that's what I'm focusing on.
That is awesome. So now you are obviously my go-to LA producer, and I would be so happy to share that with everybody else. And I know there's definitely advertisers listening to this show. So if indeed somebody does want to connect with you from that realm of production and sort of bringing their brand stories to life, how do they get a hold of you? Or do you have a separate site for that part of the business? Or what's the best way for people to contact you?
That's through Stories and Objects. It's just Jamie at storiesandobjects.com. Okay. Stories and Objects is both the media platform and the production company.
Okay, great. Beautiful. So you heard it right there, everybody listening. If you want to work with Jamie, if you have a production, if you have something happening in the world or out in LA, connect with Stories and Objects, connect with Jamie. She is a wealth of knowledge from herbal blends and skincare to big budget shoots to run and gun, you name it, she can do it. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much. It's been so good. It's been so good to just hang out and like hear your voice, and it just reminds me of our journeys together in the desert.
Absolutely. I was thinking the same thing. It's so nice to hear your voice and those amazing Midwestern values coming through. I've always enjoyed every moment of time, either on the phone or in person with you. And I hope we get to reconnect again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much. And really excited that you were able to join us. For everyone listening, as always, we'd love it for you to go to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Give us a rating and review. I love a 5-star rating, but as Jamie has mentioned, I would rather have authentic. So if you authentically think it's a 1, at least let us know why. We'll try to improve upon that. And as always, man, it's been great. So we'll see you guys next time. Later.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, head over to iTunes or Spotify and give us a great rating and review. A Quick Read is a Leap Group podcast.